Welcome to the 4th Annual Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm Jennifer Daly, President and CEO of ICR Iowa, our region's economic development organization and the proud host of Inclusive ICR. Inclusive ICR is a coalition of over 114 members representing 57 employers from throughout the Iowa City-Cedar Rapids region. Our goal is to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our regional workforce. We are so excited to be hosting and sponsoring 11 sessions during this year's Iowa Ideas Conference. We hope you enjoy the conversations, make new connections, and walk away with some really big ideas.
This is access to cell and internet communications. We're probably going to focus more on internet than cell at this point. My name is Craig Gemoules. I'm the managing editor of the Gazette newspaper here in Cedar Rapids. And we're very fortunate that we have two panelists who have a lot of insight into their respective communities' needs for access to online. As everybody already knows, we've been increasingly dependent on internet and cell communications over the last decade. The COVID experience and then the derecho here in Eastern Iowa put a great big exclamation point behind that. And now you pretty much have to have internet access to schedule a COVID test. Apply for unemployment benefits, participate in the census, have an education at all levels, and even participate in the conference here today. And so it's, when it goes out, we notice it. And I can speak firsthand about the difficulty in putting out a newspaper without power, without internet, and with only spotty cell phone service. It was definitely a miracle. With us today, we have Mark Lane, who's the superintendent of the Decorah Community School District, and Hollie, Trenary, who is the library director of the Marion Library. And welcome both of you. Both of you bring some special expertise to this and insight to this because both of you have overseen efforts to improve access in Decorah and in Marion. But before we get to that, let me do two things. One is for people who are still joining us now, this is access to internet and cell phone communications. If for some reason you got in the wrong panel by mistake, you're welcome to join us and stay with us. As I've said in previous sessions, this is not like getting on the wrong airplane at the airport. Your luggage is not going to go to Hawaii while you go to Peoria. You're welcome to stay with us. But let me start out by asking Mark, in your vantage point in Decorah, what are the barriers you see, the obstacles you see of people you need to serve being able to have the access they need to access your education?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think the things that really came to the forefront as we entered into the emergency closure for COVID in March, as we began the process of saying, how do we make learning opportunities available to students, was that the issues that we were going to face, maybe that are a little bit unique for us, were really tied to our geography and our population density. And so as a rural community and in our corner of Iowa, with people spread out across, our school district is over 300 square miles, and we have a lot of staff and students that live in rural areas, so they're spread out. And then the hilly geography of the Driftless region here in Decorah people's access to a broadband, a high-speed internet connection is really spotty, and so we knew going into emergency closure that we would have families, students that needed internet access, and maybe the roadblock for them was financial. We have students, obviously, as all school districts do, that are qualified for free and reduced lunch, and there may be financial roadblocks to them having good internet at home. And honestly, those were some of the problems that were the easiest to solve, because we could work with, Mediacom or a local vendor, and if they lived here in town, we could provide some financial support, or we could get that access taken care of pretty quickly. It was more with our folks that live in rural, both students, and then with a number of staff as well, that in order to do things, engage in learning online, we use a system called Canvas as a learning management system. And our staff that were trying to teach remotely from home, they experienced challenges. It was eating up their data. If they used a satellite internet, they would exhaust their data limits within a couple days. If they attempted to upload a video, it might take hours, or they might lose connection and have to abandon work. And so we're still battling that with staff and with students who live in our most rural areas, where it hasn't been a venture that would make any company a lot of money to lay the fiber necessary to get these folks a really strong wireless connection, and so they rely on satellite internet or on their cell phone, and then they just miss out on some of the capability that I think a lot of us take for granted.
Hollie, I know that if you look over the last few years in libraries in general, I don't know, the mission of libraries has changed, but the methodology has changed a lot. And it's no longer, libraries are no longer just a place you go to check out a book. There's a broad range of services. And so I'm sure that people rely on you for things that are different from relying on the school district for. I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about kind of how the mission or the method of operation for libraries has changed, and what you have seen as the emerging barriers that are now coming to pass that you find that we still have to address.
Sure. I think you touched on a good bit of that at the beginning, Craig, as you were going through the list of things that people are using the internet for these days. As we talked about this in preparation for this session, fundamentally, libraries haven't changed at their core. Libraries are always about access to information. And so, and that trusted source of access, and access to the internet, to wireless capabilities, that connectivity that we're looking for is a part of what people are trying to access at the library. I always like to tell stories about, back when I first entered the workforce decades ago, there were unemployment offices on every corner, right? So if you needed to go in and apply for unemployment, you could head up to the unemployment office and file for unemployment. And there were usually a few of those around town. That's just not the case much anymore, right? We would, maybe go into a staffing agency or do those types of things to look for jobs. And as those types of bricks and mortar centers have gone away at the state and federal level, libraries are really the source for that now. So if you go or you call in for unemployment assistance and you say, well, I don't have access to the internet, they're going to say, go to the library, right? And so libraries truly have filled a gap in our emerging society where more and more is going online. And if people don't have that access at home, for whatever reason, the library fills that. So you mentioned the census. Libraries play a huge role. This year was the first time that the census went 100% online. And the whole goal from the federal government was to push as much of that participation online as possible. And there was a huge call out to libraries to have dedicated computers in the public library so people can come in and do that. to provide support, to go out and try to reach out to our communities. So very much like what you said, these are critical daily tasks that people need to complete. And the only way to do that is if they have internet access.
I know that, both, I don't know what to call them, customers, clients, people in your communities, depend on both of you for essential services, although the services might be different, they're still essential. And I know that both of you have overseen efforts to increase the amount of access in the communities, not without a cost. And I just wonder if, and let me start with Mark, if you can talk to us a little bit about what's happened in Decorah. And one of the things I think is so interesting there is that even before COVID hit, you guys were very much up to speed, more so than a lot of districts were in technology with the students and one-on-one and technology parity. So I wonder if you could just walk us through kind of the highlights of what you've overseen in Decorah, what the district has done to improve access to its students and parents.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think it's important, as you said, I think there were things that we had in place that not all school districts have in place when the emergency closure started. One being a one-to-one device program. And so every student in our district from preschool through high school is issued a device. In our preschool through fourth grade, we issue students an iPad. And then in 5th grade through 12th grade, they're issued a MacBook Air. And so, those devices were issued to students before any of this happened. And then the second thing that we had in place, because we have that one-to-one initiative, was a learning management system. And there are lots of different learning management systems in education. We have used a program called Canvas as the learning management system in the past. And so I think those two things really put us ahead of the game when we went into emergency closure, because we didn't have to go back to and say, how are we going to get devices? We did have to figure out, because we don't allow our elementary kids to take their device home. They leave it at school. So at the elementary grades, we did have to arrange for family pickup to get those devices out into students' hands. And then but had those things in place that I know many friends across the state worked really quickly to try and figure out how to make those two things happen. The issue that we were facing was more around getting our staff and our students then connected to the internet to access Canvas, to use the things that we were needing to do. And one of the things that we did very quickly was expanding wireless network on our campuses. And so we have 5 campuses that are here in town, and then we also have what is the former North Winneshiek School District. We have that building after consolidation that's in the northern part of our district, and so knowing that people didn't necessarily all have access at home, we put in outdoor wireless network system on every campus, and so students and staff. This is something that will be maintained in the future. But a student could pull into the parking lot 24/7 with their device, and they could work in their car. We've expanded that network so they can sit in the bleachers at our football stadium or our softball field. At one of the elementary schools, we have picnic tables at our playgrounds, and people can access there. And so that was something that allowed for, during closure, for students or staff to be in proximity to their school, to get connected. And we, well, now that we're back in school, we still take advantage of that frequently. And then we did work to get more access in people's homes as well. That goes back to, like you said, some of the funding. And so, we as a school district, we received about just a little bit over $100,000 in CARES Act funding. We've probably spent double that to make all these things happen. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah, and before I ask Hollie the same question, let me stay with you for a minute. Previously, when we've talked about equity funding, I think what comes to people's mind the most is school transportation and busing and equity that way. But equity takes on a whole different meaning now, I think, when we look at access to internet and cell phone. And it can be very different. I think financially it hits different people different ways, obviously, but you mentioned the geography as well, which not everybody has to cope with, but the geography of northern and northeastern Iowa is different than it is in like southeastern Iowa. And so that it does add a layer of complication there as well. I want to come back to you a little bit, talk about some more details, but let me go to Hollie first. And I know that you've done something similar at the library in terms of boosting the Wi-Fi outside, and you've also increased the ability for people to check out hotspots, which I understand are going like hotcakes.
Yeah, so our hotspot program here in the Metro Library Network, which is Marion, Cedar Rapids, and Hiawatha, it's been in place for a couple of years. What I will say is that we've been very focused on being efficient with the turnover of those Wi-Fi hotspots. In the Metro Library Network, we have 75 Wi-Fi hotspots that we circulate out within the Metro Library Network. Though there's always at least 100 people on the list for those Wi-Fi hotspots. And so definitely continues to be more popular or more in need than ever with everything that we have going on. For us, I always say to folks, if you're worried that libraries are not relevant anymore, go into one or two. And you will always find computer usage is our second highest activity service that we provide in the library. And the hardest thing that a library can ever do is to close its doors, a public library. And so we were very, very worried about what that was going to look like for us. And I can tell you that we tracked our wireless usage outside of our building every day during COVID, all the way up to the derecho until we were out of our building. And on average, we had 30 to 50 people on a daily basis still logging into our wireless internet from outside of our building. So people sitting in their cars, even after the derecho, when I thought for sure there is no way that people in their cars in the parking lot are getting access to the internet, they were. And, we talk a lot about critical access, like school and people being able to connect to work. But another area that we, tend to forget about when we talk about, the digital divide and people having access to information is what COVID has done for our senior population, where they are very isolated and, trying to stay safe, healthy, health-wise, so they may not be interacting with their families. Those are the kinds of things that just really, in addition to the things that we've already talked about, break your heart, right? And some of my favorite stories will have people come in and say, hey, my son gave me this iPad and I have no idea how to use it. Can you help us get connected, right? And so we have folks that have devices, but they may not have the level of download speed that they need because of affordability, or maybe they have that and they have, they're working from home and they have a kid online from, going to school online, and there are multiple things pulling them away. So, we're trying to keep that continuity for folks that they can still reach out and connect, not only for critical needs like school and health and their work environment, but just to make connections to their friends and family. One gentleman that I met in the parking lot not too long ago was reaching out to a wife that was actually overseas and had been caught and couldn't get back. And so he's been communicating to her in the library parking lot with the Wi-Fi is the only way they can communicate on FaceTime. So there's just a lot of stories that way. Early on in COVID, we had a young man. The Marion Independent School District does a phenomenal job with the one-to-one program too, but a young man was sitting outside the library, and I could see him from my office, and I happened to just have a hotspot in my office, and I just reached out and I was like, hey, do you need a hotspot? Because his mom was at home working. They didn't have enough speed for them both to be, for him to be doing his schoolwork and her to be working at the same time. And I was like, do you want a Wi-Fi hotspot? And he was like, I got to ask my mom. And sure enough, later on that evening, I got a call from his mom, and she was like, thank you so much. And I was like, send him back to my window tomorrow and I'll get him hooked up. So there's just a lot of things that we don't think about, of those needs and what people are trying to connect to. Since the derecho, we have been able to get some grant money to do some more of the community hotspot stuff that Mark was talking about. Just yesterday, we had a couple of librarians that went out to a mobile home park and did a community hotspot, which really boosts out and can do almost the whole complex in one full swoop. So they were out there trying to get people connected so they could fill out FEMA paperwork. So that's another thing that we're really excited about, is to have that broader community hotspot functionality where we can go and kind of set up a mobile hotspot environment in a parking lot, in a community, in a neighborhood. It's one of many. We have just kicked off a project for a mobile library unit, or a bookmobile. As you all might recall, bookmobiles from back in the day, but this is really going to be a technology enabled mobile unit that will be able to do more of that technology outreach.
Interesting. You mentioned the elderly people affected especially by loneliness. I was in moderating a rural health care issues panel earlier, and tell my own personal story. I have a almost 93-year-old dad who lives in southeastern Iowa, and it's been hard. Obviously, he's been on lockdown in the retirement center, as you can imagine. But he doesn't have the savvy to, if I gave him an iPad or something like that, he would know how to use it. And so my question, maybe more from Mark, is I wonder, not that you have to worry about a lot of 93, 94-year-old senior citizens, but my guess is that a lot of parents, period, don't know all the technology ins and outs. I know I don't. I wonder if has the job of an educator changed somewhat recently, where it's not so much or not only teaching in a classroom, but it's now all of a sudden you have to get up to speed on all kinds of different technology and helping people access their accounts. Have you seen the job? I don't know if you have or not. Have you seen the job of educators change a little bit? So it's not just delivering the education, but it's delivering the access to the education.
Yeah, definitely. I think, one of the things that we were hearing very quickly from parents and honestly from some grandparents, because, right, they were maybe the person helping in that emergency closure. If parents were continuing to need to go to work, if they might be the people at home helping our students get connected and engage in learning. One of the things we were hearing from families was, gosh, I have a first grader, a fourth grader, and an eighth grader, and I'm getting bombarded with emails and all these different accounts and passwords, and I can't keep track of where I'm supposed to go for this kid and what I'm supposed to do for this kid. And so, one of the things that I think, right, as a teacher, in a normal environment, you feel responsible, right, for your classroom and the kids in your room. When kids were at home, we took on this whole new dynamic of, serving families and whole families. And we had to really, I guess I would say we had to reduce the variation in what we were asking families to do. And so, we tried to streamline as much as possible our communication. We tried to direct families to here's one point of access to getting into Canvas. We created blueprints for our teachers so that, you still want teachers need some flexibility, but it shouldn't be so different that a parent sits down at the computer with their first grader and then sits down an hour later with their third grader, and it's two completely different worlds. That's not good customer service. That's not fair to those families that you're asking to go above and beyond. And so I think that was something that was new and different that we really hadn't thought about before. As we came back for the beginning of this year, we tried to do even more, was really to streamline families. Here's where you go to get here's where you start, and here's how you, within, can we get families where they need to be in 2 or 3 clicks? Because we're already we were asking a lot of them. And so, I think the other thing that we've had to do, and I think this is my role in this, when you put a device in every kid's hand and when you have that accessibility, it becomes really easy to put the pressure on teachers that they have to be available 24/7, right? They care about their kids, and so as a superintendent, I think one of my jobs is to give them the permission to say it's okay to take care of yourself, to not be available 24/7. And so we've tried to navigate putting some parameters on, it's okay to shut your computer and to not be responding to email at midnight as a teacher, because that access, it puts the pressure on the teacher to say, yep, I'll do it. I'm available all the time.
Yeah, I know the feeling that this work from home, access to working from home. I find myself oftentimes telling people to take the day off. That there are some people who think that because they can't go anywhere, they might as well work 7 days a week. And it's like I don't really expect that, and I thank you very much, but I don't really expect that. We talked a little bit about barriers to access, like financial, geography, just an overall tech savvy. But I would think the school district has some other ones that have to be concerned about also. On the other end of the spectrum, instead of, we're talking about elderly people who maybe don't know how to even turn on an iPad. I don't know that my own father would know that. But a first grader may not be the best target audience for online learning either, or a learning disabled student. Mm-hmm. In this era of access to internet, how do you find your district is coping with those special, special needs where elementary students may not be the best target audience for online learning. And there's been a fear, I think, that learning disabled students maybe are going to be left behind in all this.
I'd like to
go ahead.
Comment on that a little bit too, Mark, after you're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
About how we're trying to support in that area too, but go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would say, first, I would say with our youngest students, preschool, elementary, and then I would say I think all of our teachers attempted to do this. We didn't think of fostering remote learning as only screen time and only something that we would do through our devices. And so, an example that comes to mind are our Decorah Music Booster Club that provides great support to our district. They funded the purchase so that our elementary music staff could put together take-home kits of various instruments. And so we with younger students, we created take-home kits of manipulatives and games and ways to learn through play. And then we maybe would post directions for how to do that online, or if someone needed the directions, we would provide a paper copy of that. But a lot of our remote learning was how do we foster engagement at home with parents through play, through meaningful engagement, and those kits allowed for us to be able to send some things home and foster that dynamic with special education students. one of the things that we really relied on was our partnership with our AEA. We're part of Keystone AEA. And so you might have a special education teacher, you have a special ed consultant, you've got that family, and the individual education plan that has always existed in special education took on a very new meaning in these circumstances, because now you're even tailoring even more specifically what is it this individual needs. And in Iowa, as we've moved into this school year, there were 2 new sections added to every student's IEP. So in an IEP, there are different pages that document different their goals, their just lots of different information there for their unique plan. Iowa has added a page called the I page, and in that document now there is what is this student's unique plan? One, if they have to go into a hybrid learning model, and 2, if there was an emergency closure where they had to go to a full remote learning, what is the plan for this student? And it's tailored to their unique needs, and it's tailored to their goals. And so I think in Iowa, we shifted very quickly to try and do the best we could in those first couple months. And now going into this year, every IEP team is sitting down with parents and they're engaging in this conversation around what's our plan to meet these needs. And that might include, some things like this, like connecting with their teacher via Zoom and or with a special education associate or a speech language pathologist. It might involve them coming into the building. When we were in hybrid learning, we had certain students with IEPs that they came at, other students were only coming 2 days a week. They came all 5 days of the week just because remote learning wasn't an option for them. So we had them in the building every day. So it is really that unique plan.
Yeah, I was just going to add how my shameless library plugs, I keep talking here, but I think what's been interesting for us in supporting the school district, our local school districts here is, this virtual learning is all great as long as all of the curriculum and everything that you need is online. And it's I think brought a different perspective to folks of how important an actual book is instead of curriculum online. Teachers still need their kids to read books, and they still need to be able to read out loud, and they want to be read out loud too. And as you talk about those younger grades, Craig, this is something that we've been really desperate to help support here in Marion and Limar school districts that we support in Marion. We have a couple of new products that we have that we're working on. One is a Wonder Book, and it's really focused on that beginning reader up to about 2nd grade, where the book has words, but it reads the book to you.
Oh.
So the kiddos can read along. We also have another kind of package that we get from the same vendor. It's called a book pack. So it's an audio book where they're reading the audio book to you while you're reading the actual book. And this goes up to much higher grade levels. But what we are trying to do is to put together reading level book packs for those virtual students who are not going into the classroom, who don't have regular access to their school library, that we can try to work with the teachers to augment and supplement book packs that kiddos and families can come pick up from the library. So I think it's interesting as we talk about internet and this internet age, and everything is going online. I mean, there are copyright issues. The books that teachers want to read or want to have their students read in class cannot be shared online, or there are not online versions for that reading level. And so, our print material still reigns supreme, regardless of what anybody thinks, as we continue to support these virtual students, especially in their reading.
Thank you. Is there, I'm not sure how to ask this question, but knowing that we've had the Band-Aid ripped off of technology, I mean, we're increasingly dependent on internet and cell phone to just conduct daily lives. And COVID and now the derecho for us has really ripped the Band-Aid off of and said, hey, it is the thing now, really. You have to have it, or access to it or you're going to be left behind. From your vantage point, Hollie and Mark, what do you see that's long lasting from this, or what will live on or get more attention as a result of this? And I'm thinking the easy one I'm thinking of is broadband. I mean, there's nothing that has pointed out. I think all along we've known that we needed to increase broadband in the state. But this just put a underscore underneath it and said, hey, we can't wait. Do you guys, from your vantage points, do you see other things besides broadband that says, okay, this is the crying need and we can't think of it in the future anymore, it's upon us now?
I want to just continue to underscore broadband. And I know that's not what you want me to do, Craig, but I think for just some reference for some folks, there's a really great website, broadbandnow.com, had some really great stuff. And I'm just using that as I'll cite this as we talk, but we talk about Iowa ranks 45th in the nation for best connected from a broadband perspective. And if you look at the statistics across, we have a really good spread of broadband service across the state of Iowa. It's out there, it's there to be accessed, but speed is a really big deal. Out of that, again, from the broadband, we are second to lowest on download speeds, only behind Alaska. So I don't know, I've been to Alaska, it's pretty remote. We're right in the middle of the country, right? And so I just think that, I think a lot of what we've learned through COVID and derecho and all of that, it's going to be long lasting. I think there's some really positive things that come out of this, which is, we don't have to sit in the office every day for 10 hours a day to get our work done. Like, there's other opportunities. We don't have to travel. Those of us, in our lives that may have to travel a lot, that maybe there's some cost savings for employers and folks in that way. But I don't even think we're at I want to be bold here, but we're not in the game. We're not in the game, right? I feel like we have a long way to go before we can say 45th in the United States is not good enough for Iowa, right? And, we all have a tendency, and I hear it so many times a day in the library. Everybody has the internet. Everybody has a cell phone. And it just, I get it, right? I have the internet. I have a cell phone. I have 3 TVs in my house, right? Like, we all very much take for granted what we have, but we got to start defining everybody, and everybody is not always who we think it is, right? And we have a tendency to talk about those people, whoever they are, but this is a huge issue, and I really don't think that we can move past it until we solve for the equity issue that we have. We can't. The fight has to continue. And I think this COVID environment that we live in, and even now through the derecho, we talked about this, that, there are people now that went weeks and weeks and weeks, and still in my, branch library that we've set up in uptown Marion, we still don't have solid internet, 2 months after the storm. So it's just something that I'm very passionate about. And I think that it's just table stakes. Like, we've got to hit the table stakes before we can start moving on.
Yeah. Mark, are you seeing the same thing in terms of priorities going forward, now that really we've had a huge exposure to the role that technology plays in our lives? It's more obvious now than it ever has been before. Is broadband the thing that you're seeing that still is the big boogeyman in the room?
Yeah, I would agree with what Hollie said, and I think of it as a school, right? As a state, and I think we're hyper aware of this in school systems. If we want the rural lifestyle of Iowa to be an attractive, viable lifestyle, which I think it is. Like I love living in Decorah. There's so many awesome things about living here. If we want that to be an attractive option for people, to keep our rural communities vital, broadband is essential to that. Right? I mean, we should be able to attract people to a place like Decorah who, you know, could work from home most of the time for a company out of Chicago or Minneapolis. And maybe they have to drive into the city, you know, once a month or something like that. But in order for that to happen, right, they have to have connectivity. They have to have the option of doing that. And, you know, we're reliant on our enrollment to fund our school systems. And so, yeah, I want the community that we serve to be this place that attracts young professionals, that attracts people, you know, and in Decorah, we're blessed with things like, you know, we have Luther College, we have so there's a lot going on here, toppling Goliath, Pulpit Rock, right? Come drink beer. If there's a lot going on here, but but that makes it a nice place to visit, not necessarily a nice place to live. Broadband, good schools, right? Those are the things that allow people to say, this is where I want to live. I choose to live here. And so I agree with Hollie in saying, you know, electricity, water, broadband.
Right.
My house needs to have those things.
Yeah.
It's essential.
You know, I think since the Decorah Eagles have their own live stream, everything must be online in Decorah, right?
Yep.
Just FYI, the governor talked during her Q&A earlier today, talked a little bit about broadband. And as Hollie pointed out, we have a big hole to climb out of. The stats she gave were that there's been $81 million in state and federal investment into broadband expansion. And that has leveraged another $120 million in private investments. And over 2 years in Iowa, 70,000 homes, schools, and businesses have been affected by that, which it seems like a pretty substantial number. But if Hollie is using the stats that Hollie pointed out, we're down at the bottom to begin with. And so it's going to be probably a while before that makes that much of a difference on a wide scale. I think for each of those 70,000 people who was touched by it, it made a big difference. But on a broader scale, still there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of holes to be climbed out of. Mark, let me ask you also, we've been talking about students and parents and their access to education, online education. What has your district done to help teachers themselves learn how to teach online? I mean, my mom was a school teacher years ago. She never learned in school how to, do an online course. I think even the brand newest teachers have had very little brush with this. On the other end of this communications equation, the students on one end, the teachers on the other, how have you had to cope with that?
I think one of the ways that we've done that is just because of the work that the district and this was done previous to me being here, but as the district moved forward with developing the one-to-one initiative, right, and investing money in things like Canvas, a learning management system, the previous administration and the board of directors, if you're going to invest money in the hardware, yeah, you need to invest money in professional development for the adults to know how to use those things. And so I'm sure maybe people have heard in our state, we have a funding stream in public schools that's called teacher leadership compensation. That is money that funds teacher leadership roles. We have a technology integrationist person that is funded through our TLC money. And so a teacher in our district who is dedicated to providing professional learning opportunities for other teachers in our district. And so one of the things that has just happened over time was embedding technology learning with Canvas, with other web-based tools in our professional development plans. as we were transitioning for this school year, what we did for our teachers was we developed a program, we developed an online self-paced asynchronous learning opportunity for them to work through this summer that was really in preparation for remote teaching, hybrid teaching for the beginning of this school year. And so we used some of our professional development funding to pay our teachers to engage in up to 15 hours of independent technology work over the course of the summer, so they could do that at their own pace, and then work through those modules on how to build out their Canvas course, how to upload videos, how to record themselves using a tool called a swivel or whatever that might be. And so, it takes an investment of, right? It takes an investment of money, and it takes an investment of teacher time. And I think there's always, things compete for both those things. And so I think it's just what we've done over time is just tried to provide that professional learning opportunity for teachers, because if you put a tool in people's hands but you don't teach them how to use it, they're not going to use it.
The Mark and Hollie as well. Have you had to change your in terms of access, people that understand how to access internet? Have you had to change your operations at all in terms of being as much of a help desk as you are a school system? And answering questions about, how do I log on? I can't get my device to turn on, or have you had to take on a bigger role as a help desk, different from what you signed on for essentially as a school district?
Yeah. Oh, Hollie.
Go Hollie. Yeah, I know you talked about this yesterday when we were kind of what you guys had to.
Yeah, I think I would say yes on that regard, although that's what we do every day at the library. I would say for us, what we've seen is this forced push to ebooks, for instance. So no one's ever checked out an ebook at the library. They're used to coming in and browsing and getting their print version. And so we've done a lot of work throughout COVID. And we would actually say, to a certain degree, it's been a blessing for the library, because we have so many online resources at the library that people are not aware of. And when you're no better time than when you're forced to try to figure those things out, right? So it maybe has been more of a blessing in disguise for us. We are doing a lot more tech support and trying to get our folks access to the online resources that are available through the library. So we've definitely seen an uptick in that.
Interesting.
And I would say the same thing. I think, and this to me goes beyond just the technology pieces. I think we saw all over the state of Iowa when the emergency closure happened, right? You saw school districts feeding their communities, right? Within days, people were serving thousands of meals. And so, yeah, I think there's just things that because people in the community, right, they have a relationship with their school, they have a relationship with their library. When crisis hits, they go to people they trust, they go to people they like, they go to people they think care about them. And so a local library, a church, a school, when people face crisis, they go to people they know and trust. And so, I think it was definitely something that, like I said, our nutrition services team they said, what do we need to do? Yep, we'll make it happen. Our technology team has said, yep, what do we need to do? We'll make it happen. I think the thing that has been unique is it's usually something like the derecho or a tornado, right? It's short-lived. It happens, people respond, a flood, and then a few weeks later, for most of us, life returns to normal. This has been going on for months. And so I think now people, you get fatigued from just, you know, you just get fatigued from being that resource to people for months and months and months in a way that other disasters haven't taxed us.
Yeah.
Well, and then you're affected as well, right? And I think my heart gets biggest for teacher parents, right? So not only are they parents, you know, like myself, trying to get my kids online and doing their work, but they're also teaching a class online, right? And so, you know, in the library industry, our life is relationships every day, all day long, and interacting with people. And when you don't have that, and then you know that there are people coming to you just for that's a whole new dynamic.
Yeah. I have a read or a question from somebody in the audience to pass on. I don't know the answer to this question. Mark, what is the role of the Iowa Communications Network? That's the statewide broadband outfit and called for in the state law. What role do they play in online learning?
Hollie, I think from my perspective as a school person, I feel like the time of the ICN has passed.
Mm-hmm.
Like things that we used to rely on the ICN to do, like what we're doing right now,
mm-hmm.
all exists inside my computer. Like I don't need the ICN anymore to connect. And so, you know, there may have been an ICN room in a school, or there have been an ICN room in a library, and that was where people went for a meeting like this
mm-hmm.
In their community. And so, you know, our connection as a school district with the ICN doesn't really exist anymore because we have the things that we can do those things independently now.
So
that's interesting. Yeah.
So I can speak to how the ICN, I think, is still playing a huge role, and that is with some really fast, good fiber is what they provide. So we in Marion, the Marion Public Library is the hub, the ICN. We used to house the ICN room. So back in the day, those of you that may be familiar, it was the first in the United States, the Iowa Connectivity Network, where it connected public schools and libraries together to be able to broadcast out training, and really, really cool kind of thing. I still have an ICN room, which is empty. We use it for storage now, but we still get our internet access through the ICN.
Okay.
And it is a very wonderful fiber connection that we have. And we house the internet connection then through the Marion Independent School District and the Northland School District. So we are the hub. And usually in each community, back in the day when the ICN was really big, the hubs were usually a library or school. And so we serve as the internet hub where those school districts get their internet access. So I still think that the ICN is very relevant as it pertains to internet access and that broadband coverage. And they're working to continue to expand that into municipalities and out past sort of the library school district mentality or group.
Good. Yeah, it's good to know that. I didn't know the answer to that, how they were, what they were doing today, and how dependent you are or not on them. Thank you. In the few minutes we have left here, a couple, one question I want to ask you. Mark, you talked a little bit about this, about how the district got $100,000 in CARES Act money, but obviously you spent a lot more than that. And I'm sure that's probably true everywhere. If you somehow or another had a blank checkbook, you dream on, right? Is there something you would do that to increase your students and parents' interaction with the school district that you would do if money was no object?
If money
Hollie's laughing.
Money was no object.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I would do first was strive to reduce class size.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's no matter what, I don't ever believe there will be anything that replaces the power of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so a teacher's ability to develop meaningful relationships with students and families, right? The fewer interaction, or the fewer groups of people, the fewer students, the fewer families they have to interact with, I think the richer those relationships can become. And so, that was one of the comments that we started the year in a hybrid model where half the kids were in the building on a given day. And the thing I heard from teachers that they really liked about only having half the kids in their classroom the first 5 weeks of the year was they said, I've gotten to know my students so much better than I did in the past, right? On the first day of school, their classroom and they were getting to know kids, but even with the kids being in the building only half the time, because there were less of them, they had this feeling of, I'm really getting to know
Closer.
my kids. And I
That's
thought,
interesting.
so that would be the first thing I would say.
Yeah.
I'm glad Mark went first. Do I get to answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a little time to think about it. Sorry, Mark. I was in the library in every neighborhood. My second soapbox after access to broadband internet is transportation. And I think especially for kiddos and working families, after school is a big thing for me too. We are diagonally across from the Vernon Middle School here in Marion. We have upwards of 50 middle school kids who come to the library every day after school because there's no one home, because their parents are working. And not all of the kids in this community can walk to the library. And so I would take my money and I would put little neighborhood libraries that have collections and internet access and everything they need on every corner.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank both of you for taking the time out today to be part of our conference. Your insights and expertise are very valuable, and we're very lucky to have you here. And I want to thank both of you. I want to thank our audience for participating and sending questions. If you have other questions later on, if you go to our main page on Wahova, all the speakers have contact information there that if you want to send a question in, you can certainly do that. For members of the audience who want to continue on the infrastructure track, this is a session on the infrastructure track. The next one is at 3:15, and that's on aviation. We've seen a lot of growth at the airports recently or in the past with cargo and passengers, and COVID really put a screeching halt to that. So that's going to be the next session on the infrastructure track, and that will include the airport director from the Eastern Iowa Airport, the DOT, and Collins Aerospace. So I think that would be a very interesting session if you want to go to that and stay on the infrastructure track. Again, thank you for participating, and special thank you to our sponsors who made this all possible. And I'll see you later. I guess I have to go at some point today, pivot to put out a newspaper. So I'm going to do that now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.